Welcome to the Caffeine Stream on Caffeine and Philosophy.
All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Caffeine Stream. My name is CB Robertson. This is episode 58, I believe. And today I'm joined by Josh Wood to talk about the, I guess this will be kind of the philosophy of the body a little bit. Not the philosophy, capital T or anything, but just exploring the subject because it's hard to come to any kind of definitive conclusions, but there's so much to explore in the philosophical and just the experiential effects of changes in our body. Now, Josh, you've been not just a physical trainer, but you've been doing a lot of things pertaining to the body for quite some time. Is that right?
Listen, Chris, I've been known to do some things. I keep busy.
like K2 and Everest, or at least in that ballpark, or and boxing
Well,
and uh,
yeah, yeah.
give us a taste of some of the things that you've done. You're now a sort of general physical trainer,
Hmm.
and not just exercise, but also like nutrition and stuff, in Australia, Tasmania. Um,
Yep.
but what were some of the other things you've done?
Wow. Um, I mean, sometimes I forget how many things I've done until someone is like, "Hey, I'm getting into this thing." I'm like, "Oh yeah, yeah, I did that." Um, I just I like learning new skills. I like having new experiences, and I try and keep my experiences as diverse as possible. Like I don't like to pigeonhole myself. I don't like to be a specialist per se. Um, I'm a generalist. I'm one of those ADHD generalists. I hyperfixate on something. I'm like, I'm gonna climb mountains. I'm gonna trek the Himalayas. I'm gonna get into free diving. You know what? I think traditional archery sounds good. You know what? Firearms sound really good too. Let's get back into compound bows, like always hopping from thing to thing as it takes my interest and getting as much from the individual areas of expertise as possible without making it my whole life. So I mean, I've been in uh, fitness as a professional since I was 21, so 2011-ish, I think, 11 or 12, somewhere in there, somewhere around there. My first career was actually in manual therapies. I worked and taught massage. I ran a clinic space and a gym, and then one out of my home as well. Uh, I used to be really into spearfishing and got my free diving certifications. Spent a lot of time in the water when I was living up on the mainland in Australia. I've done a lot of outdoor stuff, worked as a wilderness guide, uh, spent some time in the Himalayas, Sri Lanka, uh, mostly guiding here in Tasmania. Spent a bit of time in the combat sports world. I've been doing that actually probably most of my life since I was about 17. I got into MMA and then spent a little time in grappling and jiu-jitsu. Competed many years ago. That was probably over 10 years ago, 12 years ago when I was playing around with jiu-jitsu and doing a few tournaments there. Decided that, it was time to get stronger and stop being the skinny guy. And so I went into powerlifting. And generally speaking, like I take these different skill acquisitions to a reasonably high level for the average person. In jiu-jitsu, it was a national tournament, and I pulled third, first in a local tournament back with gi jiu-jitsu. When I was boxing, fought in the ring at a local, I guess, city level tournament in Melbourne a couple times. Took a state title in traditional archery. Uh, took took a state qualification in powerlifting. Uh, what else did I do? I don't know, man. I just like go out and do stuff.
Robert
But
Heinlein
mostly
would
it's
be
been
proud.
what's that?
Robert Heinlein would be proud. Specialization is for insects.
That's
Is
right.
the
That's
line a
right.
grown man should be able to lead an invasion, change a diaper, lift a heavy
Yes.
rock, wherever else the quote goes.
That's exactly it. Like I've always speaking of big rocks, yeah, strongman. Took third place in my category about a year ago in strongman for the first time.
Nice.
It's the only strongman competition I've been in, and I did that on a bet because I was training a guy for it, and I was like, you know what, if I'm training you, like I could probably beat you. And so made sure we were in the same weight category and went head to head there. I took third, he took second, so he did beat me. We had a steak dinner as a wager, so loser buys steak dinner.
Well, the cool
But
thing about it though is as the trainer, if you train someone who beats you, that's kind of still a win. In
it's a
many ways,
win-win
it's
for
more
me.
of a win. Yeah.
Yeah, so I had to buy the steak dinner, but he paid me to coach him, so
It
it's a
works out.
win-win-win.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
So
awesome.
that, yeah, just, I mean, various strength sports, combat sports. For competition, it's only been grappling and boxing. I trained boxers and kickboxers when I was up in Canada for a bit and trained a couple amateurs up to two of their first fights. Same with powerlifters, getting people involved there. Uh, Introduced a lot of people to backpacking, worked as a guide and a backpacking coach for a while. And I still do that a little bit, but it's not really my primary branding anymore because it's not the field that I work in. But I do train people who have a lot more tactical athletes, a lot less backpackers and guides, and a lot more emergency response, fire, police, military type stuff, which has a lot of crossover
I
to the
can imagine.
backpacking and guiding domains. Um, what else, man? I don't
That's
know. I've worked in
incredible. That's already a lot.
classrooms a lot. It's like I do adventure stuff, I do fighting stuff. I've spent a lot of time in education. Like I said, I was in massage and ran a clinic, but I taught for 6 years in a school as well, and I taught the personal training courses here as well for a few years. Um, I do public speaking. Like I just,
Yeah.
diversify.
That's a whole lot of stuff. And that's really, I think the exactly the right background to talk about the sort of differences in mind state that follow from differences in the body as well. I've done, I mean, nothing like the extent of the stuff you've done, but like, I've done a few things. I was tumbling and doing like basic gymnastics type stuff in high school. I did, probably 6 years of karate and a little bit of capoeira and some other stuff. I played soccer for 16 years. And but the experience I always think of when I think about the body is um, the difference between looking at yourself in the mirror after several consecutive nights of bad sleep and maybe not eating well, and looking at yourself in the mirror and be like, oh, I look like crap. And then, with no physical changes whatsoever, getting a couple good nights of sleep and looking at yourself in the mirror and being like, I look
Yeah.
fucking good. I am very happy with this. No physical change at all. Like even the face is like negligible. They're like saggy eyelids. It's like the difference in the mentality that comes that follows from differences in physiology is or at least should be, I think, fascinating to the amateur philosopher or the more experienced philosopher perhaps too. This is like the big Nietzschean point about how like there's no more profound question for the would-be philosopher than the psychology and the physiology behind certain philosophies. And so, I mean, having done all of these different sports, all of these different I shouldn't even say sports because many of these physical undertaking like mountain climbing it's almost not even a sport, but it's a serious physical undertaking. Regardless. And have there been any of those kinds of profound feelings of like getting into a different headspace, like from boxing to being at 16,000 feet or whatever, and the lack of oxygen at that height?
Mhm.
Like were there certain experiences that were notable to you in how in your in like a mental transformation?
Yes and no. It's interesting, and I do want to clarify something. I'm not a mountaineer. Like I don't climb mountains, but I trek. I trek in mountains. None of the technical ice climbing and then rock climbing and stuff like that.
Sure.
Just to clarify that for people who don't have much
So
experience in those realms.
Kilimanjaro climbing, not northern face of Rainier climbing.
Yes, exactly. Geez, man, there's been so many things. So I look at it as just another day of work. This has always been my my philosophy. It's a good podcast to talk about that. This has always been sort of my philosophy on it. It's like, I just pick a goal, and I've done this again just recently with jujitsu. Like I haven't touched it for 10 or 12 years. And then 2 months ago, I'm like, all right, I need to get back into this. I haven't done a combat sport for a while. I'm not feeling as dangerous as I should. Time to get back into this. And I picked it up, and like about 2 weeks in, they're like, the next tournament's in 3 months. And I'm like, cool, sign up. All right, now I can learn jujitsu. So like I picked these targets, and then I go, okay, well, I just need to put in the work. And so I still remember like going into the ring in boxing, or going to the strongman meet, which is probably my most recent competition. It's probably one of my more recent ones. And like my mindset's always like, it's just another day of work. Like I don't get real hyped up. I don't have this like big like pump up before these types of things. It's like, well, this is what I've been doing day in and day out for this amount of time.
Mhm.
It's just time to do it again. And like it's been the same with big trips and backpacking and trekking. It's always kind of been just like my idea of just, oh, it's just this is what we're supposed to do. This is what I'm supposed to do. It's just another day of work. Uh, and then after the fact, you kind of have this like this restructuring of what you consider normal, or what you
Mm.
consider hard, or what you consider dangerous. I'm giving a TED talk in like 6 weeks. That's a big public speaking forum. And
Yeah.
I keep people are like, man, are you nervous? You worried about this? Or like, I'm like, I talk in front of cameras and to people in front of crowds all the time. Been doing it for 13, 14 years or whatever, and in front of classrooms like that. It's just another classroom. And you know what? No one's gonna punch me in the face, and nothing big is gonna drop in my head, and they're probably gonna have plenty of oxygen in the room. I don't have to hold my breath because I'm underwater. Like you go through
Yeah.
these things, and it just recontextualizes everything else. And I've rarely had those like big epiphanies, because it's always been a gradual process to get to that point of something
Right.
big. Um,
Well,
yeah, so it's just it's
you did say a couple of interesting things there, though. Um, it sounds like having a goal, like saying, like having a tournament that you're signing up for, is like, like that's a kind of. It sounds like what you're saying is like that's a kind of mental gear shift, perhaps for you. It's like, okay, now I have something to work towards, and this, like, now I'm going to use my knowledge of systems to integrate that, like what I know I need to do into my daily routine or whatever. Um, but the other thing you said that stuck out to me was, I'm not feeling as dangerous as I should feel. And like, what does that feel like? The difference between, because being in a ring and winning, combat sport events, that's got to feel pretty dangerous in like a positive predator kind of way. But what is the difference between feeling like a predator and feeling like, not as dangerous as you should feel? Or was there some kind of cue or trigger for that?
yeah. There's actually a couple layers to that. So there is a certain predatory confidence that comes from just interacting in dangerous spheres regularly. Being comfortable. Like, I mean, this is Australia. It's full of shit that kills you. And everyone's like, oh my God, you're outside. There's like a million things in case. Like, yeah, you just kind of get used to it.
Yeah,
And there's a
I've seen
certain
you post
confidence.
pictures of those jackhoppers. I haven't seen a picture of a Taipan yet. I'm waiting for funnel webs
They're
and
only up
Taipan
north.
pictures.
We're too
Oh,
cold for
okay.
them here. I
Okay.
can show you some tiger snakes. They're all over the place.
The
But
the
yeah, like
jackhoppers terrify me. When I learned what they were, I was like, oh God, those sound awful.
oh, they're awful. Yeah. If for those listening that don't know, the jack jumper ants that we have here are uh pretty aggressive, maybe like half-inch long ants that jump, swarm, and they have poisonous stingers. And they are just assholes. But yeah, like you expose yourself to those things, and you feel very comfortable. You go into situations where you're constantly in aggressive situations and navigating that with other people. Uh, that brings about sort of like a predatory confidence, but there's also a certain confidence that comes with the ability to actually withstand torture, withstand
Yes.
challenge. And I found that more powerful because the thing that everybody seems to worry about is like, oh my God, what happens if someone hits me? What happens if I get a scrape? What happens if something is difficult to do? And people are always worried about this stuff. But then when that stuff happens, like in boxing, I got the shit kicked out of me. I got soup cans. Like I was supposed to be in my second fight against another novice, and the promoters forgot about me until like a week before. And they're like, oh yeah, we got this guy you can fight. I'm like, cool. Uh, Never heard of him. He's only had 4 fights. Okay, no worries. Well, his 4 fights were to take the state titles.
Oh,
One of his older brothers was a professional boxer. The other was a professional MMA fighter. And this guy was 19. I was like 25. He was southpaw, and he was being raised to do this as his profession.
oh God.
And I got obliterated. Um, I got TKO'd from shots to the liver. I got
Oof.
just legs taken out twice,
So
and then the ref called it.
I
Broke my eye socket, broke my nose.
oh God.
Like it was bad, but it was one of the most fun things I've ever done. And like after that, like because that's the worst case scenario. Everyone's worried about that. And it's not even so much about being able to win fights, it's about being able to go, I've had this happen to me, and you know what? It's not that bad. It's shitty, but getting punched in the face isn't the worst thing. And that kind of comfort with pain and destruction, I think is almost more valuable than that sense of like I can beat everybody up. That's
Oh,
nice too.
absolutely. Yeah.
But just being able to be like, okay, yeah, like bad shit can happen to me, but it's not as bad as that.
Right.
And that was fine.
I think there's something profoundly human about that in the mammalian sense of the term, because we're um probably even ahead of wolves in terms of our abilities as persistence hunters and like endurance through the pain of just running forever. Um, Seems to have this kind of sport transcendent attraction and utility, to the point of species defining. Like where like there are poems about endurance. There's Ernest Shackleton's great story about the endurance and surviving that, and just
Yeah.
the power of holding on, coupled with our ingenuity and problem solving in other domains, makes, if you can endure stuff, you can do basically anything. So that's an interesting one. When I think of endurance, I always think of long distance running. But of course, boxing is another one, because boxing is just it's not quite anaerobic, but it's definitely not aerobic either. It's this
It's
weird,
everything.
yeah. And it's not just keeping your breathing going and keeping oxygenated. You're also getting punched. Uh, so it's that's an interesting one. Are
And
there go ahead.
sorry, I was going to say, I was going to try to bring it back to, I forgot that the actual question you asked was like, what sort of triggered that I'm not as dangerous as I should be. And I think
Mhm.
we went off on a tangent there. And part of that is the distance between the last time I was involved in a combat sport, which would have been, I was training with kickboxers maybe 6 years ago, and I guess I did a little bit of boxing when I came to Hobart, which was about 5.5 years ago, but haven't really been involved with that. And I have kids now, and there's a certain
Gotta
like,
lay down the law.
that's right. Yeah. I mean, if you can't choke out a toddler, like what are you doing with your life? But more so, it's like you have a reason to be
Sorry.
dangerous, but you also need, because I have 2 boys, and there's also this like, I need to be capable enough by the time they're old enough to learn these things to set an example.
Mhm. Yeah. And I mean, joking aside, I do think there's a profound kind of sense of safeness you can provide as a father if you give off the energy of like someone who can protect the family. My kids have become enamored with this movie Brave, which is like a
Hmm.
strangely and uniquely good Disney movie. A lot of the
It's the
Disney
archery
movies
one.
are, yes, it's the archery one,
Yeah.
but it's not just an archery one, because at the very beginning there's this like demon bear that attacks the family, and the dad just like without thinking says, ah, grabs an axe and attacks the bear, and he ends up losing a leg. And like the rest of the movie, he's got like this wooden leg that's a part of certain jokes and so forth. But like that that ability to just without any thought or hesitation take on. Now this is a Disney movie, but still like it
Yeah.
embodies this archetype of the capable protector father that is a profound source, I think, of stability and security for your children and your wife, for that matter, and anyone
Yeah.
else who you might be around. There's when I was doing martial arts, our instructors would give us these little story vignettes at the end of class to try to get us 8 and 9 year olds to think differently. And one of the stories was of two brothers. One of them was a street brawler and one of them was an experienced martial artist, and they were both about equally skilled in their ability to fight. But one of them walks into a bar and he looks around the room and he tries to pick out who's the most dangerous person in this bar. And he's like that person, like I could give that person a run for their money. That person's in a little bit more danger because I'm here. And then the trained martial artist comes in and he looks around the room too, but without like looking for anyone in particular. And his mentality is everyone in this room is a little safer because I'm here. And I mean, as a skill, it can kind of cut both ways. But I think as far as family is concerned, there is that kind of combat value, the security value, I should say, to combat sports.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
Yeah, and I think that because I've been involved with strength sports and combat sports, I think there's a really big push right now in the fitness circles to basically say like the bigger the thing you can lift, the more capable you are. And one of the things I found like when I was powerlifting, and like I'm not a big guy. Like I competed, I was 70 kilos when I competed at powerlifting. And my max deadlift was 210. I had a triple body weight deadlift when I was competing. I pushed it about as far as I could take my body in terms of how good I can lift a thing off the ground. But I was a lot less capable in a lot of other domains, and I definitely wasn't any more dangerous. Probably had to do with my back hurting all the time. But it's just one of those things like there's this push to be like, there's definitely like pros to being big and jacked across the
yeah,
board, always a beneficial thing. Well, most always a beneficial thing. But it's it's like having a truck with a giant engine, but you don't even have your driver's license. Like if you don't know what to do with it, it's going to be useless. And so like moving
yeah.
away from the purely physical sports to something more interactive, something designed to be used with and against other people, I find to be more confidence building, but like just more functional. Like if you, it's kind of like coming full circle from like being a gym bro and be like, no, it's all about how much you can lift and how big you are, to being like, yeah, but you can't sit down and stand up
This is
without groaning.
this is almost exactly one of the points that Josh Tyler brought up when I was interviewing him several months ago, and he was talking about powerlifters who have zero flexibility, and like they'll be able to lift like 600 pounds, but there's this strange kind of fragility to it where they can lift this tremendous weight. And he's like, I will just use a bulldozer to lift that anyways.
Yeah.
And also I can still touch my toes and do somersaults and like, do other functional things that these incredibly refined strongman physiques actually become limited in. And so there's like, it does seem like there's these series of trade-offs, but the best case is probably going through the sort of the plethora of varieties out there. And it sounds what I keep trying to come back to, like how these affect your thinking, for my own curiosity.
Oh, I
And
don't do that.
it's an interesting, well, it's an
I don't
interesting,
think at all.
I feel like I'm getting somewhere interesting with you though, because it sounds like you have, when you treat these things as work,
It's just another day of work. Do you have a sort of systematic approach to how you pursue rock climbing versus judo versus fencing versus, whatever the HEMA, for example. Like how would you approach, suppose you were to get into historical European martial arts, which is
Mhm.
like fencing with a two-handed sword.
Yeah,
Like what would
I've done a
your,
bit of that.
oh, of course you have. Of course you have. Like, how would you begin to approach that, having gone through all these other things?
Well, the thing is, like, if you are generally athletic, so, not to toot my own horn, I learn skills quickly and easily for the most part, physical skills.
Mhm.
I learn new physical things pretty easily. It's something that I can stick my head into once I understand the foundations and the basic principles. I start learning very quickly. And so all these things just come down to, for the most part, learning new skills. So it's like, if you are physically incapable and you come into something like HEMA, okay, you're still physically incapable, but then you're going to try and learn these skills. But while you're trying to learn these skills, you're also trying to improve your fitness so that you can do those skills. And because I maintain a decent level of general fitness and I've applied it to various areas, it's kind of like, okay, well, I have general fitness. I am good at understanding first principles and how to apply them to other situations. So I go into new skill A and I see the connections between skills B, C, D that I've done previously. And I go, okay, well, it's just basically this. Oh, it's just this. Cool. So I'm extrapolating from all these different other like points of knowledge and then going, okay, well, I just use the physical attributes I've already developed and continue to develop and then make a couple new connections. And there we go. I've learned a couple new skills.
So you have a sort of arsenal of previous experiences and the knowledge that goes into how you develop and train for those. So whenever you come into a new task or new goal, you're like, here are 3 crossover points. Here were the training disciplines. So I'm going to pick what was like important for those things and combine them with whatever new research I'm doing, and then I know what to do.
Yeah. And it's also that kind of coming back to the car analogy. Like if you have, a sports car and it's really, really capable, uh, you can drive fast. Maybe you can do some sort of like maneuvers course. Maybe you can use it to haul heavy things too. But if the engine is there and capable, it's just a matter of applying like almost new filters through which you apply that general capacity. And then that makes it much easier to learn.
Mm.
Um, if you do it the other way, if you have no physical capacity or lack of experience, those first few endeavors are going to be significantly harder because you're bringing up basic level capacity at the same time you're trying to learn high level skills. But once you have that general understanding of first how to learn stuff, but also that general physical capacity, then you're just applying it to a new skill. And then you're just learning the new skill. And so I try to figure out, like, oh, my arms are tired from swinging the sword around. Well, it's because your arms are weak. But if you're already capable, you're just learning the swinging.
Yeah.
If you can already
So
swing a stick, then it's just how to swing the stick.
so if you've got a year to learn HEMA, but classes don't start for 3 months, you're like, okay,
Get
I know
fit.
the exercises I need to get stronger arms. I know I'm going to be doing bicep curls and delt extensions and pull-ups or whatever it is that you want to do to begin to build that foundation so that you can approach the skill side of it with the confidence of your physicality that you don't need to think about anymore.
Basically, and like another example is like you can see these rings behind me. I've basically like because this office had to be built back in October, I think it was. So I have a garage gym with a squat rack and barbells and dumbbells and stuff like that, but I haven't used it since like November. It's been full of shit. Now it's covered in dust and construction materials and things. I've only been doing gymnastics rings type training and body weight stuff here in my office for about the last 5 months. Uh, Turns out that kind of conditioning is really applicable to jujitsu because
Nice.
it's
It's
stopping
grip.
as a lot of it's grip, it's stopping, it's holding people. And like although I don't know what I'm doing, because this is all new, it's no gi 10th planet jiu-jitsu now, which is very different to being a white belt gi jiu-jitsu guy over a decade ago. But it's like, oh, I can actually just sit here and hold you and you get tired and I don't. And then I have time to think and apply things. The three moves that I know, you know? So it's like I can kind of force some of these things, but at the same time, even if I don't know, I'm much harder to submit because I can be very belligerent. I can just sit there, I can hold, and I can wait. And they're huffing and puffing, and they're, I got a year of experience, and I'm 6, 8 weeks in now. And it's like, you know what, I'm pretty comfortable here because I don't have to move, or I can just move you a bit, even though you're bigger, even though you have more experience. So having that physical background gives you more space to learn the technical stuff,
Yeah.
as long as the physical background is applicable to the new skill you're undertaking.
Right, of course. And understanding, the understanding the body through the lens of all these different backgrounds, I think would be a very useful I mean it's a building block set so that any new thing you undertake, you would kind of have that background, at least, not necessarily at the ready, but like able to pull out of your back pocket and like I could have it ready in 6 weeks or whatever.
Yeah.
I think you were one of the few people. We're both members of the Order of Fire. We were doing a running challenge back in May, and you were one of the only people who was active in the running part, because everyone hates running.
Yeah, I hate running.
But yeah, I did hate running, and then I got addicted to it. But even when I was running, like I hadn't been running for like 6 months. But because I sort of have done it a lot in the past, I ran a lot. I mean, soccer, and cross country in addition. With basically 2 months of getting back into it, I sort of walked my way into doing, well, not walking, or jogged my way into doing like a 10-mile run, and then eventually a 12-mile run, that I had not set out with any intent to do. You just sort of fall into that, because you have the building blocks and the knowledge of what goes into getting back to that place is still there. I mean, running is not quite like riding a bicycle, because there's, muscles that atrophy and stuff. But the knowledge of how to get back into running shape is kind of like riding a bicycle. And so it sounds like what you're describing is like, going through all of these different, phases of physical training. And if there is an average, about how long on average do you spend in any one of these activities, whether it's, mountain climbing or rock climbing or free diving or whatnot?
Kind of just depends, man. Like I did spearfishing and free diving for years, 4 years or something like that. And then I moved and I got too big for my wetsuit and I can't be bothered buying a new one. They're very expensive.
I believe it.
And what else? I mean, I was in combat sports on and off for, 6, 8 years or something like that. Just getting back into that. So it just kind of depends. Depends if it's something that's location dependent or something I can work around with lifestyle changes. Like I can't be a wilderness guide right now. I've got 2 young kids. I'm not going to disappear for a week at a time for work. So I don't do that anymore. Now it's camping with everything in the car and day hikes. So it depends. Like most things, like I did the strongman thing once and I don't want to do it again. Like that was just like I think I did a 16-week training block. And then I did a competition and then I'm done. Just to say I did it. And I did powerlifting for probably 2 years.
So this leads me to a very interesting question. We've been talking exclusively about physical activities, sports, and so forth, but you are, of course, not just a sports guy. You are not just a physicality guy. You also run a business. You also I happen to know that you have chickens and other animals that you're keeping at your house and trying to maintain and so forth. Like, does this kind of systems and skilled experience building block approach that you've developed in the physical domain, has that had any crossover into your home system and your garden system and your business system at all? Or is that kind of a completely new thing in its own?
No, I mean there's crossover. It's more to do with the mental side of stuff. It's learning
Mhm.
how to learn. It's
Okay.
understanding how your brain works, what's important to you, and then how to gain the skills required to do the things you want to do. And this is something that I've sort of fought for in my life since consciousness. Like basically, I see so many people uh, across the world and everywhere I've ever lived, people who are like, they're always full of wishes. Oh, I wish I could do that. Oh, you're so lucky because you did this and did that. And it's like, oh man, I just went out and did that shit. Like, what are you doing? Just go do the thing. It's like, I want to learn. I want chickens. Chickens sound fun. I want eggs. Okay, I'm gonna go learn everything about chickens. I'm gonna build a coop. Their first coop was PVC pipe and a tarp behind my house until I learned how to build a better structure. And it's like everything's stair steps. It's like, okay, what's the basics I need to have? Learn this. Okay, now how do we build on that platform?
Yeah.
And it's always this like understanding of what I want to do, what do I need to know to get there, and then how do I stair step that so it's not like all at once thing.
There's this great part in Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, which is a great novel by Robert Pirsig, where the protagonist walks into his friend's house, and his friends, the pair of them, have a leaky faucet, and it's been leaking for like months, and he wants to go fix it for them. He wants to get under the sink and fix it, but he's not sure if it would offend them or something. He's like, how can you live with this leaky faucet? And of course, the problem is that if you address the leaky faucet, it's opening a whole can of worms about plumbing and about having the right tools, and like there's all these things that you need to um these sort of prerequisites before you can actually address the leaky faucet.
Yeah.
And so his friends, in a kind of metaphor for I think a lot of modern people, prefer to ignore the faucet, to pretend like it isn't leaking, except they can't fully block it out. So it's sort of slowly driving them mad, and they pretend not to notice it, as he's just like, why not just fix it? But instead of saying, okay, here's the first thing I need to do to fix the leaky faucet. I need to get the right tools. I need to watch a bunch of YouTube videos about what causes leaky faucets and stuff, as reasons why they can't do it, rather than as things to do that you need to go up to the leaky faucet, which of course
Yeah.
is exactly what I'm doing with the tankless water heater that I bought a year and a half ago and have not installed. So I'm not exempting myself from the this problem. We all have our own priorities, I suppose. But
Yeah, absolutely.
it's it is funny how, because I wonder, because you're not just doing all these things, you're also coaching other people. Do you find that kind of attitude in some of the people that you coach, perhaps?
Which attitude?
The I would be fit, except X impediment, and
Yeah.
seeing like those initial stair steps not as steps but as like walls.
Oh yeah, 100%. That's mostly why people come to me. Like the demographic I work with is people, that busy parents and professionals. Both categories, there's a lot of crossover, but both categories are people who are like, I've got so much shit on. Like I just don't even have the capacity to figure out where to start.
Mm.
And my approach is always what I call the usage of TNT. Because you use TNT to move mountains, but TNT is tiny, noticeable things. You use tiny little changes on the daily that stack up over time. And one of the things I talk about all the time is like, if you don't know where to start, just go walking. Get 30 minutes of walking a day. And then I always have people are like, I don't have 30 minutes a day. I'm like, first of all, bullshit. But also they're like, 30 minutes, what's that gonna do? I'm like, hold up. You say you don't have time. Break that apart. Find 3 10-minute chunks. After every meal, you go for a 10-minute walk. That's your 30 minutes a day. That you can do that, guaranteed. If you can't do that, you're full of shit. You can do that 10 minutes after each meal, 3 times a day. That's 30 minutes. End of the week, that's 3.5 hours. You've just done 3.5 hours of exercise that you wouldn't have done otherwise. And that little bit of change each day, those tiny noticeable things add up and completely change who you are and what you're capable of a year later. 6 months later, even a month later, you're completely different. And then we just add the next little thing on top of that. Okay, great. Now I want you to make sure you get, an extra palm full of protein per day. And then once that's easy and no problem, it becomes your new life. We add this extra thing. So it's a very additive approach because everybody comes to me and they're like, one of the questions I ask is like, why haven't you achieved these goals previously? And then I get all the excuses. But if their understanding of why it's important to achieve these goals is strong enough, we can overcome any of those excuses. But you have to do it with this TNT, these tiny noticeable things, with this systematic, small brick by brick approach, because you can't just be like, okay, now you have to learn plumbing because your tap is dripping.
Right.
It seems like an insurmountable challenge because it's like, well, plumbing, what is plumbing? Plumbing is this abstract, really complex entire profession. Yeah, but if you just learn how to use a wrench first, you learn how to put a washer in, how to use some silicone, like those little things. You learn that, Next thing you know, you're building a chicken coop and then a raised garden beds and a retaining wall so your kids have somewhere to play. And you start owning tools. You start off with a screwdriver and then you're like, oh, this is awful. I'm going to get an impact driver. Oh my God, that's amazing. You know what I need now?
Great tools.
I need a saw. I need drill. And you get all these power tools, but just get them little piece by piece because you've learned one skill, stack it.
I was so excited. A week and a half ago, I got to break out my angle grinder to make a door in the side of our chicken coop with it's a pretty ghetto redneck door, but it's like a cedar slat, almost looks like a medieval like gate on some paracord that comes up to a loop.
Oh, I've seen it. You showed it in your stories.
And so you could just pull the door open from the side now.
It's great.
It's like, it's pretty ghetto, but it's a chicken coop, chicken coops are you kind of like that. It keeps the raccoons out. It does the job.
Chickens don't care.
No,
all my shit's ghetto. Like all my gates are all made out of old pallets. Like I just during the COVID years, I got a bunch of pallets for free, and then I started building gates. And like use that to build my second iteration of the chicken coop. The first one, it was just PVC, tarps, and twine holding it all together because I got given these 6 adult chickens and I'm like, okay, they need somewhere to live. But rednecks know what's up.
Yeah.
That shit works.
And it's by messing around with and figuring out what doesn't work that you get better at making things that do work. I remember the first time I tried to make a bookshelf, I was like 14. I didn't know like anything about shop or building things. So I was trying to make the supports out of what were essentially paint stir sticks. Like there is no way this thing had the structural integrity to hold books. It actually ended up not having the structural integrity to stay upright, like on its own with a little bit of jostling from movement. It was not a stable thing. I was like, oh, okay, I need substantial wood in order to make something that's substantial. A very cheap lesson learned fairly early on, although later than perhaps I should have learned it at like 13 or 14. But like, you try things out and you get better at making things as you do it more.
Yeah, absolutely. Like as a teenager, I worked in a computer shop. Like I was the computer nerd. I had no practical skills outside of computer things. And then shortly after that, it was combat sports. But you're right. You just kind of do it, learn some stuff, then do the next project, and the next one's a little bit better.
This is sort of a callback, perhaps to your your boxing experience. But I wonder, do any of your clients, and you don't need to get specific, obviously, but generally, like people in the fitness, do you get a sense that any of them are not pursuing their fitness goals out of some kind of fear of failure or fear of like the...
Oh man, almost not my clients, because now they're actually pursuing them, but many people. I talk to people, man. I've talked to a number of men this year who they're on a quick path to the grave. Guys who have just let themselves go for decades and they are obese and they have heart problems in their 30s, or they just hate what they see in the mirror and they feel like garbage and they're mad all the time and life is shitty. And like we do this future projection, we go, okay, well, what if you continue down this path, where are you in a year? And like it's the most depressing and dismal stories of this path that these guys are on. Uh, but they're so afraid of failure that they run away from solutions. And I did a call out on Instagram a little while back, a little, I think, a little reel about it, where it's just like, stop running from solutions. Like I see this so often where real adults who can otherwise maintain high levels of responsibility, look after family, whatever, but this thing that is going to kill them, if you hand them an offer, they're like, hey, this can fix all your problems, the stuff that's literally killing you and making your life miserable. And you can just see that they're so concerned about having to do the work, do something new, or potentially fail, which they can't if they do the work. Like I literally have a guarantee on my coaching. You do the work, you get the results, guaranteed. And like I just hand it to them, like this is the solution to your problems. And you could just see that they're like, I don't know what to do with this information. I need to think about it. I need to ask my wife. I need to, and then you never hear from them again. And it's the wildest thing in my mind
Yeah.
because I'm so solutions oriented and so like, oh, there's a problem. I'm just gonna go ahead and fix that. That I just almost can't understand that somebody could act that way in the face of a solution, but I see it so much. Just mind blowing.
That that sort of reminds me of the faucet situation, but I think I am getting to what I was trying to, where I was hoping the conversation would go at the very beginning, though. I was beginning to lose hope, but here we are. Um, do you think do you think your background in physical sports and physical training and getting the shit kicked out of you, and the pain of holding your breath underwater and all these other kinds of things, do you think there's some kind of correlation between your experience of endurance in these physical backgrounds and your willingness to just sit down, face what needs to be done, and do it? Because it seems to me, and there are a number of very interesting philosophical writers. I'm thinking mostly of Nietzsche and Yukio Mishima, to be a kind of physiological connection between the body and the state of the body and the loquacious ability to generate excuses and to generate
Ooh,
reasons not to do what obviously and clearly could or should be done with a certain problem.
that's interesting. That's a very interesting question. Uh,
Because
because
it sounds like this is something you have never personally struggled with, and you've also been active your entire life. Whereas there are other people I know who, and I think with older people, alcohol can be a big source of this impediment for slightly different reasons.
yeah, it's interesting. I'll give you a little bit more background on me. Like I said, I was a computer nerd in high school. I was not active. I was scrawny as all hell, and I didn't reach adult weight until I was like 30. And it's, I one day I was sitting in the computer shop that I was working at when I was 16, almost 17. No, I was almost 17. And I was just sitting there one day and I must have been incredibly bored and there must not have been much work going on, but I just came to a conclusion that I was so tired of being weak and afraid. And like just like
Hmm.
the idea of any possible challenge or altercation, like I've just, I was absolutely scrawny. I was a short kid in high school. And it's just like one day I was like, fuck, I just remember so much of my childhood being so unconfident in terms of like putting myself out there to that risk of failure was so terrifying to me. And I don't know why that is. And I don't know where it came from, but there was this point. I still remember sitting in the computer shop and going, basically, fuck this. I'm gonna learn kickboxing. which they didn't offer in my town. So I ended up doing MMA. But that's not the point. But there was this breaking point. And it was shortly after that that I also said, I am not going to live my life the way that I see everyone else living their lives in small town, Midwest United States. I'm going to leave and I'm going to do the things that I read about in books. And I'm going to buy a backpack and I'm going to disappear. And more or less, that's why I'm in Australia. But like there was these 2 points where I was like, it started with that day where I was just like, I'm not going to live like these people, because I look at the people around me and I look at the world around me and I go, they're all doing something wrong. Maybe they're not actively doing something wrong, but they are missing something vital from life. I don't want my first baby mama at 18. I don't want to be obese and an alcoholic working at some corporate soul-killing job by the time I'm 25. I didn't want to go to university and accrue $1 billion of debt to work in an industry I didn't care about starting from when I'm 18. I was like, no, all of this is wrong. And that is the failure that I feared more than the failure of putting myself out there. And so I said, all right, I'm gonna learn how to fight, and I'm leaving the country with a one-way ticket, and we're gonna see what happens. And like that was my like pivot point in my life. And ever since then, it's always been like I see people are afraid of certain outcomes, but the outcomes they're getting right now and the path they're on is worse than the outcomes they're afraid of. They just don't see it yet. And I don't know. Well, I hate to say it's a chicken and egg thing, because the chicken came first. But the issue is that the you could say it's a physical thing that creates this mindset, or you could say it's the mindset that creates the physical thing. I don't know if it matters. They both exist together,
and they feed into each other.
Absolutely, it's an Ouroboros. It's an infinite loop. Like the weaker and badder and more sedentary you get, the more scared and mentally weak and incapable of taking action to get yourself out of that situation you get. The worse your body degrades, the worse your mind degrades, but not just your mind, but your sense of will, your sense of personal power and drive. And as that dies, your body dies. And as your body dies, your will dies. And then you get all these, people who shouldn't be old, adults in their 50s, adults in their early 60s, who are terrified of everything, absolutely terrified of everything, which we saw a lot of these last few years. So I can't say which way it goes.
Referring to?
Climate change.
Yeah. That's a young people thing. They're afraid of Coney. They're afraid of Coney in 2016.
It's always been Coney.
2012. Yeah. They're showing how dated we are. Yeah. That's my feeling too. That they seem to feed into each other. For me, it felt like the physicality leading, and like you were saying before, it's not just how much can you lift, but certain skills. I was signed up for martial arts when I was like 9 or 10, and I kept going at it until I was 16. I got my black belt when I was 15 or 16, which is like not, you can't read too much out of that in terms of fighting skill, in Shudokan karate. But for a short kid in high school, I was like 5'1" until like junior year. Like it's very easy. Like I would see other kids getting mocked or bullied and taking it fairly hard. And if people would say that kind of thing to me, it was very easy for me to just be like, yeah, I'm short, whatever. And there was no fear. And it became easy to actually laugh along with, not that I ever like made fun of myself in that way or anything, but it was just like there was a kind of confidence that comes from martial arts, I think in particular, but also in strongman and endurance stuff where you get the crap beat out of you, whether you're doing it yourself or giving someone else the honor. You're like, yeah, I know I can take it. It's not that big of a deal. And like, I was never bullied. I guess in retrospect, there were a couple instances of people trying, but there was no bite there for them.
Yeah.
As I like was a very unattractive target because it just didn't affect me, because of that confidence. And maybe that I think that was an example of the physicality preceding the mindset. But I'm sure it's the other way for other people. And like you said, maybe it doesn't matter at the end of the day which comes first.
Yeah, I mean, one thing, a pattern I see a lot is people, they have all these fears and insecurities and things, and they finally go, I'm just tired of being fat. I'm going to get in shape. And then they start to get in shape, and then they start going, I have more energy. I feel better. I want to undertake other things. I love moving my body. And this whole cascade of positive effects happen before there's even significant weight loss. And so I think something about just undertaking something, about the
Like
movement as well.
like getting a good night's sleep before looking at yourself in the mirror, almost.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. It doesn't take a lot, but once you start undertaking something, it changes all of that. Even if you don't have the physique you've always wanted, you start to go, oh, like I can control an aspect of my life. I can control it well, and that has a carry-on effect to everything else you do in life.
Fantastic. Well, so we've been going for about an hour, but I feel obliged to ask, suppose someone wanted to begin that transformation process themselves. Do you know of anyone they might be able to go to help them along in that in that process?
There's this really, really great guy I often refer people to called Coach Josh Wood. Uh, I would probably speak with him first.
All right. And where can they find you and your information if they wanted to begin that?
Yeah, you can find me on Instagram, Coach Josh Wood, or my website, which is strongforlife.online. My business is Strong for Life Online Coaching. But if you just search Coach Josh Wood on most platforms, I do show up.
Awesome. That's super cool. And I guess one final thing before uh calling it a podcast. You mentioned you're giving a TEDx talk in a few weeks here. Can you give us any hints on what that's going to be about?
Oh yeah, it's pretty simple. My talk is about how to eat like an adult, and it's a not so subtle implication that most of you out there are not eating like adults.
Okay. And how would one go about the beginning to eat more like an adult then?
Well, you could get my free Eat Like an Adult guide available on my website.
Okay.
Uh, but I mean, the whole purpose of the talk is essentially you have choices every day, and the decisions you make around those choices are directly shaping the future you have. And because of food's importance in our lives and in our culture and societies and families and everything, that's an area that people can make a lot of really simple decisions, but very important decisions that lead to a very different future. And it's going to come down to basically understanding that you're an adult, which means you need to make choices. And they're not always going to be the most fun choices right here and now, but you're doing it because you want the future to be better. Whereas children say, I don't want that. That's not nice.
Or
And
children
they
eat what they've been handed and eat what is habitually provided from by their past rather
I
than making those choices.
exactly. And that's the big takeaway from the talk is, as parents, uh, everything our children learn or that we learned when we were children came through our parents and through mimicry, watching what people do, and assuming that because they're doing that, the people who are authority figures, seeing them doing it, we must also be supposed to do that because that's supposed to be what we're doing because it's supposed to be good for us.
Which is
And
like how advertisements work.
yeah, and I mean it's how humans learn. It's mimicry, and that's not always the case. And if you're not setting a good example, not only are you not giving yourself a future that you're going to enjoy, but you're also not giving that future to your children.
Hmm. And maybe setting a bad example for your children.
Exactly.
You're at it.
Exactly. Well, that's it, because they're going to learn those habits from you. So you need to have a better relationship with food so that they can. And a big point in this talk is that as of this month, there was a study that came out in the Lancet that obesity is a greater risk to world health than hunger is now. There's over 1 billion obese people,
Yeah.
and 40 million of them are children.
Which probably has no bearing to anybody listening to a philosophy podcast, because you're probably not at risk of starving. But,
Yeah.
the health risks of not just overeating, that's bad enough, but also just eating low quality foods. I mean, like we were talking about before, there's this chicken and egg problem of mindset and physicality, but bad foods can definitely put you into a bad state of mind. Even if it has no visible change in your physique,
Yep.
can change your mood. It can do all kinds of things. So
This is health. It's
Right.
it's all interrelated. It's everything. There's no one thing that fixes everything. It's everything fixes everything. But you got to take control of something first. And this is where we
Yeah.
get back into the leaky tap
it's
situation.
like Jordan
It's
Peterson
overwhelming.
cleaning up your room. It's
Yeah.
a starting point. It's
I'm never gonna
not
do
an
that, but
answer to
yeah.
everything. Your room looks very clean. Looks cleaner than mine. As the
Well,
reason I'm
this is my
pointing at the wall.
workspace.
That's true.
Uh,
Yeah.
But yeah, it's the same thing. It's you take control of one thing. If you are stuck in a rut, if your life is going to shit, just pick one thing. You don't have to fix everything. Pick one thing and control it. And for a lot of people, food is the first place they go for self-medication and making themselves feel better. But then it also makes them feel worse because they just ate an entire block of chocolate and they know they're not supposed to. Now they're guilty and fat. And it's like, hold up, just one thing at a time. Pick one thing, control it. Once you can control it, move on to something else.
Eat an avocado and then bask in the pleasure and joy of the power you are exerting over your existence in that choice. And it sounds like simultaneously petty and like almost megalomaniacal, but like you said, it is a real exertion of control, and it does, like you say, add up over time.
Yeah, it'll change your life. If everything's going to shit, pick one thing, control it, and once that's under control, pick another thing. And it's that stair-stepping pattern, those tiny noticeable things. It's the TNT that moves mountains.
Awesome. Thanks so much for coming on, Josh.
Thanks
It's
for
been
having
an
me.
absolute pleasure. Take care.